धा धा तक दिन था धा तक दिन धा धा दिन ना धा तक दिन धा दिन ना धा तक दिन धा दिन ना धा तक दिन धा।
सुबह जैसे आँख खोली तो हमने सोचा कि चलो चाय वाय का कोई बंदोबस्त करते हैं, देखते हैं। जैसे आँख खोली, इधर भी मुर्दा और मक्खियाँ ऐसी उनके ऊपर कि जैसे कि लेयर ऑफ मक्खियाँ नहीं होती। जब तक असी जिंदा तुसी भी जिंदा हो, जब 80 मर गए तो फिर उसी जिम्मेवारी साड़ी नहीं।
Good evening,
मक्खियाँ ऐसी उनके ऊपर कि जैसे कि लेयर ऑफ मक्खियाँ नहीं होती।
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being with us once again. Welcome, and I'd like to wish everybody who is celebrating Independence Day for India today a happy Independence Day, and everyone who celebrated for Pakistan yesterday a happy Independence Day to you as well. Unfortunately, for those of you who tuned in yesterday, you will know that we had some serious technical issues and weren't able to come online, and therefore had to cancel yesterday's session. But fortunately, we are able to do yesterday's session today, keep tomorrow's session as it was, and move what was meant to be today's session to Monday. So I am very, very grateful to all of the interviewees for agreeing to do that. It seems to have been a Facebook issue. Actually, we found out later that there was a technical glitch on Facebook and it was a wider issue than just us. So no amount of restarting our laptops was actually going to fix anything, but we did try. So I would just like to thank everybody who sent in a message to say that you would come back today. And it just really meant a lot to know that people were waiting to watch this and we're excited enough to come back today. So thank you so much for that. So just to recap, now it was 2 nights ago, we had Jane Borges on, who was talking to us about Goan Catholics specifically and partition, as well as the experience of the model Christian villages in Punjab, in West Punjab. A fascinating insight, really, especially for someone like me who spent most of my study of partition really looking at, well, Hindu and Sikh Punjabis, frankly, who came this way, and also coming from that family experience. So it was really, really interesting, and it left a lot of questions in my mind that I want to look further into. And I had a message from somebody later saying that they had Goan Catholic family in Karachi, and it was very difficult for them to come to India for Christmas and so on. And so I'm hoping that we can chat and I can learn more about that as well. So we're now at the last 3 days of this, and this endeavor has been entirely personal. It's just been something that I wanted to do, and I reached out to people whom I would love to have on, and fortunately all of them said yes, we'll love to do it as well and make these whole 2.5 weeks possible, for which I'm really, really thankful. But my motivation is entirely personal. 3 of my 4 grandparents came down from Pakistan to India, and the last 2 days are going to be 2 very, very special interviews with the 2 women whose stories have been my motivation. My Nani, my maternal grandmother, and my Dadi, my paternal grandmother. So tomorrow we will hear from my Dadi, and then on Monday we will finish with my Nani, which I think is just a beautiful and very appropriate way to end this series of interviews. Please do come. They're both quite nervous about talking, and so I know they would love the support, and tell your friends and family as well. Today, I'm speaking with someone who honestly doesn't need much of an introduction in the Instasphere. She's very, very well known for her documentation of the foods of Punjab, the history of her family, as with many of us in the 3rd generation, it has been the history of her family that's been the impetus for her work, really, and a desire to know more about where do we come from and what happened. VERNIKA Awal is a journalist, food writer, and a blogger. She goes by the name Delectable Reveries on both Instagram and Facebook, and her own blog website. And she has a special interest in the foods of Punjab, for which her own family, as I mentioned, is the inspiration. She was previously a journalist with the Times of India and Exchange for Media, and continues to write freelance while running a very successful full-time blog. So, VERNIKA, are you with us?
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Happy Independence Day to all.
And to you. And I do have to start by thanking you for being so flexible and coming back today. Really, really appreciate that. So
very
thank you.
excited to do this. So you don't have to thank me. I have to thank you for having me. I mean, through the presentation, you realize how so many of the speakers were actually an inspiration for me to start what I have started doing. So to share the platform with them, I think I have to thank you for that, Ragini.
Oh, I'm so happy. I'm so happy. Yeah, I saw you put up a quote by Aanchal Malhotra today, and I have to say her book was pretty life-changing for me as well. So I definitely...
Absolutely. I mean, it's something I have been talking about and, to my elders.
Yeah.
But her book was like, that spark which you need to actually get on that journey, because the one thing which I realized with her book was that I'm losing out on time, because with every day, with every year that passes, we're losing out on people who actually have experienced it, who have something to share with you. So, I've always been very enthusiastic about food. So to remember and to even think, that why we eat what we eat. In Punjab, there's so many stereotypes about our food, because of the restaurant space. There's just too much that is so incorrect in a manner about the food which we eat. So it started there. And from there, we just started, I mean, the more I talk to people, the more I realize that there's a reason why we eat what we eat in a particular season or at a time frame. And, there's certain dishes which I will talk about. They're dishes which were born out of, out of a misery. So they have this bittersweet memory attached to it. So, I mean, I'm just glad that I'm doing this, and I'm glad we all are doing this, because I don't think we can afford to lose our heritage. There's a way to go forward, and I think the only way to go forward is to actually be rooted first.
Absolutely.
So, yes.
And know full well what our family's histories are. And that's the only way to go forward. No, absolutely. So I know that you have a very detailed presentation for us. And so I'm wary of asking you too many questions because I don't want to mess up your flow. So why don't I hand it over to you, and I'll come in here and there.
So I'm just going to start, and then I think we can take in more questions later.
Yeah, everyone who's watching, feel free to keep putting up questions in the comments, but we're going to take some time at the end today to answer questions. So if I don't bring it in while we're chatting, like sometimes we do, don't worry, we will come to them at the end.
Ragini, when I'm trying to share my screen, it says that the host has disabled attendee screen sharing. Could you just check that?
Not very helpful. Just give me a second. All right, you should be able to now.
Perfect. Is this presentation visible to everyone?
Yeah, it's visible. Yeah, this is perfect.
All right, give me 1 second. All right, so it's called Delectable Punjab because that is exactly what my research is called. It's called Delectable Punjab. It comes from, the name Delectable Reveries, my blog's name Delectable Reveries. And Delectable Punjab because of Delectable Reveries and because we're documenting the cultural and culinary history of Punjab. The picture of the saag and the makki ki roti and the gajar, gobi, shalgam, achar, which you see, something I made in December this year. And I think, as usual, I was too tempted to obviously take a picture first before I bite. And I don't think in the last 5-6 years, I've even tasted hot food. So yes, everything is documented right here. So yes, moving on. This is a picture from last year in Punjab, in Hoshiarpur, where my bua stays. And I had gone to my bua's place and I requested the lady here, the help who comes to her place. She also has her own farm very close by. And that is the time when the wheat produce was just about ready, and she requested that I come with her to her farm because she wanted to show me. And her words were that jab tak ugte hue nahi dekhoge to likhoge kaise. So this is from her farm in over there. And yes, so my journey started here. So as someone who always thought of herself as a storyteller first, and then a journalist, I realized that what was missing in me was a connect to my own roots. When there is no connect to your own roots, it's very difficult to, to continue writing, because what's happening is that you're just not able to connect to who you are. The simple question of where do you belong, where do you come from? And for someone like me who's grown up in multiple cities of India, this was a question which used to trouble me the most, because I was born in Jalandhar, brought up in Dehradun, Assam, Bombay, Delhi, and now I'm back to Delhi. But my roots still are firmly there in Punjab. My family stays over there. But the connect was not there except for the fact that I was born there. So the moment someone asks the question that where do you come from, where do you belong to, I realized that there was always, I'd always hesitate a little before answering that, because I didn't know what to say. Also, because you're staying away for so long, there's kind of an intermingling with so many cultures that it's very difficult for you to differentiate that which part of you and what you practice and what you do at home comes from which culture, so what's your own. Having said that, I'm very proud of the fact that I've been brought up in different cities of India and have imbibed so many different cultures in myself. But at the same time, it was difficult for me to distinguish what is what. So Aanchal's book, Remnants of a Separation, was actually a trigger for me to, to explore the India-Pakistan partition through the lens of material memory. And what she did was that exploring it with lens of material memory, I wanted to explore the same thing through food, because food is what my passion actually is. So, reading that book, that's when it struck me that my own grandparents had also come to India as refugees from the newly formed Pakistan. And along with them, they had carried a wealth of knowledge and memories. And well, that knowledge to me, honestly, is now lost with them gone. So the need to now preserve was even more, to talk to older generations to preserve, because we are the third generation of the partition, but Ragini, we are also the people who might just be the last generation to document what we have. And if we don't preserve it, the next generation might not even know where they come from. So it's doubly, I'm doubly motivated, because now it's not just about preserving for myself, but it's about preserving to take it forward. So yes,
I couldn't agree more. And I think you and I recently had this conversation that if we are the generation that has the privilege of interacting with people who experience partition, we have to make the most of it.
Yes. 1 second. So this is the lady who took me to her farm. Her name is Kulvinder. So Kulvinder auntie, this is my bua, and Kulvinder auntie took me to her farm. What you see behind us is her khet, her gemu ke khet. And she took me and my bua and showed me around the whole farm. And, so this is a picture from there. 1 second. Yes. So we'll start with something very basic, which is the geography of Punjab. So Punjab is divided into 3 regions. And this division is due to the rivers Satluj and Beas flowing through the land of Punjab. So in the earlier times, it was not easy to cross rivers. Hence, the areas divided by the rivers were considered a separate region. Going forward, I'm sure everyone who's present would know that the regions are Majha, Doaba, and Malwa. And the regions are often ruled by different rulers, and the interaction between the people living in these geographically separated areas was limited. Hence, you will also see that there are a lot of cultural differences which are there in these 3 regions, which post-partition kind of became like, everything became like a confluence of one, because suddenly Punjab was one. Mm-hmm. But what you see is, so something as simple as in my family, the 2 languages spoken, both Punjabis, but both very different dialects. So one comes from the Majha region of it, one comes from Doaba. And so yes, due to this, there's a difference between the language and culture of people living in these regions. There's also a difference in the land, the fertility of land. So certain things, so for instance, Doaba is known for the mangoes. Doaba region is known for the variety of mangoes. In fact, there's a farm in Hoshiarpur, which has some 170 varieties of mangoes. And it's there, I think it's there in one of, it's been certified as a place for having the most amount of variety of mangoes over there. If I ever get a chance, I hopefully in the near future, I would love to go there and document it as well. But yeah, some 180, 170, 180 types of mangoes just in that region itself. Okay, so the regions are Majha, Dwaba, and Malwa. Majha region is between Ravi, Byas, and Satluj, which is basically Amritsar to Western Pakistan. Dwaba is between Byas and Satluj, so your Jalandhar, Hoshiarpur, Kapurthala, these areas. Then there's Malwa, which is Ludhiana onwards, south of Satluj. So Malwa is also the region which then later stretches on to the Malwa Plateau till Madhya Pradesh.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So the regions Malwa, Majha, and Dwaba span over the parts of historic Punjab region, which includes today's Punjab, which is in India, Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, and Punjab, which is in Pakistan. So this is the geography of undivided Punjab. So coming to the partition of Punjab, before I even start with this, it's something which Aanchal wrote about today, and it's something which I have been thinking since morning, since the time I woke up, that we wish happy Independence Day, but that independence came to us at a cost. So there was a loss of home, and there was you've lost a homeland. So like I said, the loss of home and a gain of home. You don't know whether to celebrate this independence or whether to mourn what was lost.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I was actually, today I've had this thought for a few years, but I had the same thought. I was like, I've just had so many interviews where loss has been the biggest theme that we've talked about. Even if people are happy about it, so much was lost. So yes, that resonates.
Absolutely. I remember I was in Amritsar in February, and the one place where I do not like going much is the Wagah border for the evening flag, and I realized that the reason I do not like going there much is because you're sitting on one side and the other side is literally approachable, and yet it's so far.
Yeah.
And it's because there is like a vigor of nationalism, like the heightened vigor of nationalism in the place. So you're proud. Of course, you're proud of the nation that you are in. But at the same time, it's so difficult to feel in a different manner. The way we've been taught to feel about that nation, it's so difficult to feel that while sitting there, because come to think of it, that also is home.
Yeah.
So home is literally stone throw away, and yet it's so far. I remember reading this poem by one of my favorite poets, may his soul rest in peace, Nida Fazli, and these lines never left, they never left me. He said, it's like Hindu bhi maze mein hai, Musalman bhi maze mein hai, insaan pareshan yahan bhi hai, wahan bhi hai. Which is so true.
So true, yeah.
So yes, moving on. So the political administrative boundaries are not cultural boundaries. And I think you would agree, because this has literally been the theme of, I think, Partition 73. Yeah. We've been divided by a political boundary, but the cultural boundaries, you cannot divide culture by a boundary. You don't divide that tree which, that leaps over from that side of the border to this. You don't divide those birds. You don't divide the culture.
Absolutely.
So, yes. And an inevitable line was drawn in 1947. The land was divided into two halves. As a result of this division, many factors came into play that led to the evolution of Punjabi food as we know it today. More importantly, it also created a definitive point in shaping the identities of families on either sides of the border. So talking about my family, our family took refuge in the Indian part of Punjab after the 1947 partition. They belonged to a small town called Kamalpur, which is very close to Rawalpindi, which is now in Pakistan, which also falls in the Majha region. And post-partition, they shifted to Adampur in Indian Punjab, which falls in the Dwaba region. So as a result, one can notice a confluence of these two cultures distinctly in my family in terms of the language that our ancestors spoke to what is spoken today. If I have to give an example of the language which was spoken, so if anyone over here in the audience would remember Divya Datta in Veer Zara, language, the Punjabi that she spoke was originally the Punjabi spoken in my family, and now what we speak is, Punjabi as we know it today. So, yes, this is a very important quote. I shared it today as well. It's by Aanchal. It says, migration is often accompanied by a feeling of unavoidable disorientation, and the circumstances of 1947 would have pronounced this feeling even more. In most cases, it would have created an involuntary distance between where one was born before the partition and where one moved after it, stretching out their identity sparsely over the expanse of this distance. As a result, somewhere in between the original city of their birth and adopted city of residence would lay their essence, strangely malleable. And I can see this in my family, in something as simple as the language, that we are literally swinging between the two. We are now in the third generation, but even now, if you come to think of the wedding traditions for that matter, they're so much more similar to what we would have practiced there than what we would practice to somewhere close to in India. So you're always swinging between the two. So at the end of the day, the question is, what is home?
Can you give us an example of a wedding tradition?
For instance, something as simple as Sehra Ragini. Sehra is something which was practiced in Pakistan as well. It still is, even in the Muslim families and in the Hindu families, as well as the Sikh families. So this is something which is there in both sides of the border. The phoolon ki chadar, in which you get the bride in, the fulkari or the phoolon ki chadar, that is common between both sides. The folk songs which you sing,
yeah.
I'm sure for those people who listen to Coke Studio Pakistan, you would realize that they are the ones who are actually preserving our folk songs of Punjab than we are.
Absolutely.
So, we're swinging between the two, because at the end of the day, your connection to that side is far more than, say, to what you would have, to some other state in India.
It's so funny you say that. I can see that both of these people are on here, so this story will resonate with them, hopefully. But when I was very young, I had a fight with my Pakistani best friend, and our fight was over which country has better basmati rice. Okay, this was our fight.
Wow.
And we both got very upset, and I think there was we used to talk every 2 hours, but I think there's a period of like 6 or 7 hours that we didn't talk. And my dad said to me, I don't remember, I must have been about 14. My dad said to me, and this really stuck with me, he said, with Pakistani Punjabis, we have almost everything in common except our religion.
Yeah.
With many other places in India, we have almost nothing in common except our religion.
Absolutely.
And that line has stuck in my head for over 20 years. And I think it's part of this. But when you were saying this, I was like, that scene just came back to my head immediately.
That's so true, because at the end of the day, it's just a line. I mean, if you remember, Radcliffe actually took his life out of the burden of what he had done. And he said that had I been given more time to draw this boundary, I would have done a better job of it, because I know what I have done is wrong.
Yeah.
So yes, moving on. This is again outside Kulvinder Auntie's house. This is seen from the Pind of Punjab in Hoshiarpur. And I just thought of giving a glimpse of it, because these are my personal journeys, which I keep taking every year, every few months, and I keep going and visiting over there, in every season that I can. So yes.
Yeah.
So talking about partition and food, which is our topic for the day. So food and identity are closely linked. Food is considered fundamental to the creation and maintenance of group identities. And because it is consumed, it has a potency and significance exceeding other cultural symbols. I'm sure you would agree, just the fact that because you can taste food, it always, it's a very strong cultural symbol, simply for the fact that you see it, you hear it, you taste it. So the chances of it remaining with you, so the memories, something as simple as, someone eating something and they'll be like, "Arey, aisa to wahan pe bhi khate the."
Yeah.
वहाँ की याद आ गई, and things which people say ये याद आ गया and वो याद आ गया. It's simply because food is such a strong cultural symbol. And what we don't probably realize is that food and identity are so strongly linked. I'm going to elucidate on that further. So food connects the what to where. It has become a way of locating us physically and geographically in the context of home, community, region, and nation. Something as simple as when you say chole kulcha, rajma chawal, people know that you're coming from Punjab. When you say dhokla, you know we're talking about Gujarat. You know, so this I think is a very important thing. We are consuming geographies because cuisine is as much about its taste as it is about a sense of place. So consuming geographies, so we are at this side of the border, but thanks to the food, we can taste what it must be like, what it might have been like over there. We are consuming geographies, we are connected to our roots, you know, because we are consuming that geography.
I really like that line, food connects the what to the where.
Yes, thank you.
Beautiful line. Yeah.
So food has kept alive collective social memory to serve as, serve as a cultural signpost in Indian subcontinent's history. A familiar meal in an unfamiliar setting helps fight off the panics of disorientation. I'm sure for the families who've heard the stories, who've experienced the partition, who've lived in the refugee camps, who have, you know, been through the tension of the partition, will remember and would acknowledge how much food helps to fight off the panic which sets in, you know, with this disorientation, with this moving around, with the loss of home. Because while your home is not something you could carry with you, what you can carry with you is the taste of your home. It's something as simple as that when you go from India to abroad to study, the one thing after, I think after a point which you do want is ghar ka khana. Even for some, you know, even if I can speak for myself, after I have been outside for at least a week, all I want is ghar ka khana. So, you know, you try to recreate what home is to you through food. So the deprivation and sense of loss following the partition was retrieved by the migrants' engagement with food, because when in exile, what remains as a reference to the cultures of origin concerns food, with food becoming a regular discourse of the past and a nostalgic narrative about the country. It's literally what I just said. This food is what is connecting you to your past, and the nostalgia that is, you know, that is attached to that food. I remember I was talking to Sherry. I don't know if you know about Sherry. Sherry Malhotra is a brilliant home chef who is documenting the food of undivided Punjab. And a few days back, she was talking to me about the ande chole, which is made in the, you know, in the lanes of Lahore, the street food in Lahore. Yeah. And she kept telling me that her grandfather always said, "Ki ande chole khata hu na, to mujhe bachpan yaad aata hai." Because for him, bachpan is what was spent over there.
Yeah.
So it is a nostalgic narrative about the country, and that through food, you are keeping it alive.
No, absolutely. And I think even when we were talking with Anubhav and also with Shubhra, we came up across this, you know, at a personal level, like every family does this, every person does this. But that even at an entrepreneurial level, you're naming the dishes after where you come from. You know, you're naming your establishments after where you come from.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've mentioned this over here that, you know, and I'll tell you about my personal experience with this, because this whole research has literally stemmed out of my curiosity about who am I.
Yeah.
So yes, this is, well, the picture which I had put over there. And the reason I have put it here is because, you know, I'm sure we have audience who's also from, you know, not Punjab or has anything to do with Punjab. But when you talk about saag in Punjab, and when you talk about saag outside of Punjab, the, you know, the kind of connect which what people think about it is so different, because when we talk about saag in Punjab, we're talking about the stems, you know, the stems of the sarson, and it's made of, like, you know, 3-4 combination of different kind of leafy vegetables. Whereas outside of Punjab, when you serve palak,
right,
with sarson, you know, with makki di roti, that is what for people, that is sarson ka saag. There is no sarson over there at all. But this is, well, to bust the myths, that when I started researching, it was important to put this out about our cuisine, because there are so many misconceptions about it. So what you see is a plate of literally winter goodness. that masale wala gur, the makke di roti, the winter ka achar, because you can see the color of the carrots. These are vegetables which you get in winters, the red carrots, the tastier variant of the cauliflower. And then of course there's the saag. So these are things which I started documenting and started putting out on my Instagram handle on Delectable Reveries. And it's been amazing the kind of response I've gotten from people, because I've actually had a kid, she must be 18 now, but some 3-4 years back, she wrote to me from New Jersey. And the girl wrote to me on Instagram and she's like, I'm 15. And one thing which I always hated was the fact that I'm a Punjabi. But I started following you and your work some time back. And now I like saying, and I proudly say that I'm a Punjabi, and you want to read more about us, go to this handle and you can read more about who we are, what we are.
Wow.
That was a personal win. The fact that I am connected, and through me, so many more other people are now connecting to their roots and preserving it.
Yeah, that's incredible.
I think for me, that was a personal win.
Absolutely. That's really incredible. If you can inspire someone in that way, then, I mean, yeah, kudos to you. Awesome.
So then, of course, since we are talking about food, what you see on the left is dried onions. And what you see on the right is the bharwa karela. The reason I've shared it here and when talking about partition and food is because this is how you preserve food. So, when you have less, how do you preserve it and keep it for longer periods? This is a practice which I'm sure you have noticed that a lot of communities in India do, especially in Kashmir, drying of vegetables because of the season. Right. But over here, we were now preserving and drying our food so that it lasts us longer. You don't know how long you will be in refugee camps. You don't know where the next supply of food is going to come from, when it is going to come. So you preserve it. I'm sure every Punjabi would know about these bharwa karelas stuffed with, mostly, lots of onions and the peels of that karela itself. Yeah. And this is something which I have noticed, these dried onions is something which I noticed in my family, that they dry it in the summers and then they make a powder out of it. Now the same powder is something which we mix with anardana and then later sprinkle it in, parathas or whatever you want. Wow. But it's a nice way of preserving your current produce and making it last longer. The simple thing which we say, that how Punjabis know how to use their leftover food in an innovative manner. It's something we take pride in, but it's also something that stems from the fact that every day eating the same food is, we do tend to get bored eating that same food again and again. So today, if you've made that dal, how do you innovate? Because tomorrow, you need it into the dough and you make a dal ka paratha. Yeah. So a lot of things which we take pride in, we don't tend to look back, as to why did we start doing these practices? Yeah. Where is it even coming from? So much of it comes from the fact that thoda hai, but now how to make sure that us thode mein, you should be able to last for a long period of time.
The dried onion, are they just dried from raw, or are they processed in some way and then dried?
No, it's literally just chopped and then we lay it out because it's really hot over there anyway in the summer. We lay it on the terrace. It dries in about 4 days or something. It's this dry. This is still semi-dry what I have shared here. And once it dries out, we just make a powder out of it. So talking about, making the most of what we have and how to go about it, I'll share the story of the bread halwa with you. So during the times of partition, celebrations were next to none. Each family received rationed groceries and had to make the most of it during the auspicious occasions like Gurpurab and Diwali. So the partition is something which has already taken place now. But at the same time, because, it happened in August. August is, when the exodus of people started arriving from both sides of the country. The festivities also start in India at that time, as they have already now. So with the passing time, you have Gurpurab, Diwali, Navratri, everything coming. So, you are in a tough situation, but how do you celebrate what is good already? You can't, as a community, how they say that Punjabis are very large-hearted and, they celebrate a lot and they're very vibrant people. I think that is also something which helped us get over the situation we were in, and then to be able to move on. Because it's so important to say that, okay, you know, this has happened, but how do we now get up and go from here? We've fallen, but how to get up and go? That spirit is what helped. So, not a community to be bogged down by suffering, the families in the refugee camps of erstwhile Punjab, from both sides of the newly formed border, learned to make the most of those ingredients. People were sure that the partition was temporary, and as a result, carried a few utensils and desi ghee to cook with. So, you know, it's like when someone comes to your place and says that you need to leave right now, what do you grab at that time? Because you can't take your whole home with you. What is more important? So for your sustenance, what's most important is that you have some basic groceries with you, and you have, well, you have bartan, you know, you should have some utensils to cook with. Those who were lucky could also carry, you know, their cows and buffaloes. Not cows, we don't have cows in Punjab, we have buffaloes, mudge. So they were able to carry their cattle also with them. And with the cattle obviously came, you know, the milk produced. And this is also a way in which people started, you know, selling that milk produced and, well, making the most of the situation. So desi ghee was something which was always available. And through the ration which they were getting in the, you know, in the refugee camps, what they had was bread, milk, and sugar. And this is how bread halwa was born. You made the bread halwa, you know how simple it is. I've shared the recipe for it on my Instagram page as well. It's really simple, because all you're doing is that you're soaking that bread in milk to make it mushy and give it a dough, you know, a wheat-like consistency. It tastes exactly like your kada prasad, but at the same time, well, it's made not of wheat, you know. So you're making the most out of what you have available to you.
It's absolutely delicious. I have to admit, it was the first time that I had tried it when I made your recipe to post, and it was just delicious.
So this is how the bread halwa looks. I'm lucky I got to taste it and got to know the story about this through my bua's family, the family she's married into. You know, they told me about their side of the stories, and then they made this for me. They told me how it was. So I think for me, this halwa stands as the spirit of Punjab. To fall down, to get up, and to make the most of your current situation and to move on.
Yeah,
absolutely. I remember I was in Chennai this year in February for a talk, you know, on this exact topic. And thankfully, because of the no corona thing at that time, I could make this bread halwa for my audience, and also, you know, give it. I could make them taste this when I was giving the talk. And I remember a gentleman, must be around 60, 65. He ate it, and he had tears in his eyes, because what he said to me was so important. He said, in this part of India, this partition is just something which happened in our textbooks. But with what you've made us taste today, what I'm having is something sweet, but I can't stop crying, because I can feel the pain of every single person who faced what they faced at that time. And this is exactly what I mean when I say that food is one of the biggest cultural symbols, because you can taste it. Imagine 73 years on, someone tasting it and saying that, I don't know, but today I feel the pain of the people, you know, who went through this. And I didn't even know that this was so much larger than what my textbooks told me. So imagine something that big, which affected such a big region, you know, so many people, is just reduced to, well, a chapter in our textbooks. It's so important to preserve and to remember where we came from.
Absolutely.
So this dish serves as a reminder of tougher times and how we as a community, that is the Punjabis, learned to spread happiness and celebrate even when there seemed little hope for the future. This dish stands for strength, willpower, and deep love for food, of course. And as we move ahead with time, such recipes and their stories reminds one where we came from and how to look ahead when the going gets tough. So, you know, I think this is, it's like remembering that, you know, bad times will come, but you always need to find that one glimmer of hope to know that things will also get better someday. This is a scene from, well, the left. You would recall, if you've been there, the town hall in Amritsar near Golden Temple, outside Golden Temple. And what you see on right is just an empty gully actually in the markets of Hoshiarpur. I had gone on a day when it was empty. This is Crystal Wests in Hoshiarpur. This shop is actually more than a century old now. I later got to know it was owned by a Muslim gentleman who had to then leave everything and, leave basically India and go to Pakistan, had to take refuge over there. And the current owner, to honor him, has left the name of the shop as it is and the structure as well. So, well, coming to this very important part, Delhi is not far. So Delhi, the national capital of India, was soon inundated with refugees from West Punjab, the northwest frontier province, Sindh and Balochistan. In his broadcast on 19th August 1947, Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru admitted, nearly the whole of India celebrated the coming of independence, but not so unhappy land of 5 rivers. So Old Delhi, surrounding the Red Fort, was traditionally the most populous and important commercial center. And of course, the refugees gravitated towards it. The displacement and economic hardship led many to earn a living from the Punjabi passion of good food and cooking techniques. So something like, we got the tandoors here because the tandoori cooking was something which was actually more popular on that side of Punjab, because that was also the side of Punjab which was heavily oriented towards eating meat, whereas over this side you will see that even now, around 60-65% of the population is still vegetarian.
Yeah.
So the techniques like tandoori came to India and, well, started thriving here. So to survive, they created their own means of livelihood from the basic necessity for life and survival, which is, well, food. A lot of social practices were laid to rest due to the massive influx of population and the circumstances. So you know how, because of the caste system and the religious system in India, and, well, a lot of these practices about the rich wouldn't go out to eat at the same place where the poor would, and from different castes of the people. Because of the partition, these lines were blurred because now people started seeing themselves as one. A lot of these businesses also started thriving because a lot of these things were blurring. People were now going out to eat because now there was a common cause, which was that, okay, we are one, instead of segregating amongst each other. Delhi was immersed in the Punjabi flavors and took over the predominant, I'm sorry, because of this screen sharing thing, I'm getting blurred. Okay. Predominant taste of the city, from the roadside dhaba to the fine dinings. So for the displaced migrants, this was not just an attempt at establishing oneself in a migrant-based culture. Rather, it demonstrated a visible engagement with taste, texture of a cuisine to them, and embodied particular ways of belonging, of self, and to community, to a shared rhythm of life which was now lost to them. So people were now getting out and establishing themselves and were establishing the migrant-based culture, because Ragini, I'm sure all of us would agree that when you're put in a situation where you are the odd one out, the need to then assert your personality, your culture becomes even stronger, where you need to assert that this is who I am. So this is exactly what started happening in Delhi, which was earlier which leaned more towards the Ganga Jamni, culture.
Right.
Now there was the Punjabi influx coming in, and the influence was taking place in such a manner that they had started dominating the cultural and the food space of the city.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we were talking about, I can't remember now which night, was this, the entrepreneurial spirit. Like, there was nobody else looking out for you. There was no backup. So you not only had to assert yourself socially, you also had to assert yourself economically because you had to survive.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And food, because because of the fact that it's a food loving community, it actually became the best way to survive, because food is something which no one can say no to. Everyone needs it to survive. So, well, you've hit it right at the spot where that's where it's going to earn. So
Yeah.
eating patterns of any group assert its collective identity and facilitate the process of socialization, that is transmission of culture from generation to generation. There is no history of cuisine that is also not a history of prevailing appetite, habits, and taste. I'm sure you would agree, because this is exactly, I think, where we all started, that why do we eat what we eat?
Yeah.
If I'm a Punjabi, why am I expected that I would love Rajma Chawal? Why is it not expected that I would, be more fond of, like, why would I find comfort in a Thai sadam instead of a Rajma Chawal? So it is also asserting the fact that, this is where I come from. This is, well, it's passed from generation to generation.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned that with that, just before you get to this last slide or the slide, it's also the changing nature of that. Like you've lived now, in different places. So I'm sure your comfort food is more than, just pure Punjabi food. As I know it is for me as well. And that's live history. So when we, for the next generations, it's that this population now moved, took this from here, amalgamated it with what they had, and sort of this newer culture emerged.
Absolutely. I have to confess, like I have lived in multiple cities of India and I'm fond of a lot of different cuisines. But give me Rajma Chawal any day and I'll be the happiest. Like it's not funny how people who are making Rajma don't forget to tag me on Instagram, because for them, delectable reveries is equal to Rajma Chawal, and I don't mind that at all.
It is a hot favorite.
Well, this is just to keep the audience engrossed. Punjab, hopefully you will be able to get out soon, go to some nearby dhaba and enjoy this. So coming to the topic which you discussed,
yeah,
the use of the place names in almost all dishes served exhibits a strong desire to not just replicate the dish that might have been typical to that region, but also to evoke nostalgia for their roots, a lost homeland, and a wish to sustain and transmit the memory of that taste to future generations. Because now it was no more just about eating, it was also about remembering and attaching that nostalgia to your dish. I remember when I started doing the Delectable Punjab series, when I first started, it's been 3.5, 4 years now. And I am a vegetarian. And a lot of people would, the first reaction would be that, okay, you're a Punjabi, how can you be a vegetarian? And I always thought that, okay, maybe my family is the odd one out. And the more I started researching, I realized, okay, wait, the non-vegetarians in Punjabi are the odd one out, because the population of the non-veg eaters is actually smaller in this side of Punjab.
Yeah, on this side.
So, not anything against it. I mean, food is food, and I respect everyone's choice of food. I'm also someone who loves looking at, that chicken, tandoori chicken. I love looking at it. Never have tasted it in my life. But where did these names started coming? Because, when you go to the restaurants, you'll see that you're getting dishes which would have some kind of place name attached to it. Something as simple as pindi chole. People think pindi chole is a type of chole. Except they don't realize that pindi comes from the word Rawalpindi. It basically simply means that this is how it was made in Rawalpindi. Something like a Lahori paneer. It has nothing to do with the place, except for the fact that this is probably how it was eaten over there by that person. So to remember a place and, then to remember it through taste, because that's how you carry it on. So dishes being named after cities and regions as a reminder and connect to what was lost. So Murg Lahori, Pindi Chana, Peshawari meat, and all of that. For those in Delhi, they'd know restaurants like Moti Mahal, Peshawari, Frontier, Quality, Khyber. They became the bridge to the past. Because what they were doing now was that they were serving you nostalgia. They were serving you memories from the lost homeland. In the process of masking the magnitude of losses and sufferings, Punjabi fare evolved to make their adapted home their new one. So, like I said, that when you are new to some place, your chances and of asserting your personality and your characteristics are heightened. Because of this, because there was so much of loss and sufferings, we started to make up for it through the food which we ate.
Absolutely. And I think, I think this particular sentence, you've just sort of hit the nail on the head. It's masking the magnitude of loss and suffering is what the community did. And there are various stereotypes about the Punjabi community, loud, boisterous, sort of own a space when you walk in. Whether everyone is like that or not is not relevant. But I think food is one place we see it. And then the other place we see it is Bollywood. Absolutely. Right? They came to Bombay and they were like, okay, we're here now and we're going to do this. So yeah, I think that sentence is, it's really well worded.
So, well, as a result, the North Indian cuisine became synonymous with Punjabi cooking in style. While in reality, North Indian food can be divided into Kashmiri, Uttar Pradesh, Garhwali, Kumaoni, Rajasthani, and more. Absolutely. But you will notice this even now when you go to restaurants, the categories would be North Indian, Continental, and South Indian, and Chinese. But that North Indian basically just simply has paneer this, paneer that, mixed veg, dal makhni, chicken this, mutton that. But that's it. You won't find a mention of these other places. I'm so glad that these regional foods are also now coming up and making space for themselves. But this is exactly how the Punjabis came and asserted and said that, okay, we are here and we are here to stay. I mean, globally, I think Indian food is known by Punjabi food.
Punjabi food, yeah, absolutely. Someone just said Indian cuisine internationally is synonymous with butter chicken and kali dal.
If I go abroad, the chances of me feeling comfortable in going to a Pakistani restaurant is actually, more than to some other place, because I know this is going to serve ghar ka khana. What ghar ka khana is to me,
Yeah.
So yes.
Absolutely.
Well, the Punjabi way of life, celebrating it. So food and identity. For the refugees in India, food communicated a collective self. It became the discourse with which they could mediate their presence in an unfamiliar land, what I said previously. Meals became an expression and affirmation of culture and a celebration of group ties rather than just an opportunity for sustenance. With time, this was not just about sustenance, but it became an expression of your culture. Mm. Alternate spaces were created where a shared past not only survived, but struck roots and transformed itself to forge new associations for the future. The alternate spaces being the restaurants, which we know of today. Well, making peace. There may be scope for food diplomacy in an attempt to find an alternative space from embittered past of the Indo-Pakistan relations. Food, which through dietary and ritual considerations kept communities apart in the colonial India, might in the future affirm regional commonalities which cross territorial dividing lines that were drawn in 1947. So I think food diplomacy is probably the way to go. Connecting to the people from, well, this side and that side. I know I am connected to so many people from Pakistan on my, on my Instagram.
Yeah.
And it's so much fun to just share with each other, because I think last month I had a talk with Anubhav, on Delhi food walks. And through the comment section, there was a lady who was watching it from somewhere in Islamabad. And I'm connected to her today because all she said is, okay, I'll keep sending you whatever more I find out about, and you tell me what you get to know about my family and all of that. It's such a nice way, because through food, I have now connected to a part of me which I didn't know I could.
No, absolutely. Actually, yeah, I had a very similar experience recently with a food blogger from Lahore who reached out because of this series. Yeah. And I'd made murg chole when we were talking with Dr. Nadra Khan, which is something that is made in Lahore, and we very rarely see that in India. And she reached out to say, like, oh, do you also make this? Like, how do you have this recipe? And so I was explaining to her, and it's exactly this. She was like, well, these are the things that we consider Punjabi food. And it's so similar. It's like shades of gray. But the one thing that I find is so interesting for, I'd say, the subcontinent, India and Pakistan, is that they're very, very old cultures, but they're very, very new countries. And so the culture that's evolved in the last 70 years is actually, it is what it was, but it's also not what it was in both places, you know?
Like if you actually, because in my research paper where I've traced back, you can actually trace back our Punjabi roots to, well, the Indus Valley civilization.
Yeah.
Tandoor is something that was first found in that era.
Yeah.
We have been a land which is right on the Silk Route. So, you know, before we were divided and facing adversities separately, we were one and facing it together.
She's together, absolutely. And that's, I think, also even with Sindhi food, you see the foods have very different names because the language comes from a different language group. But the actual foods themselves, you commented that day when I made that, you know,
You made the rote, yeah.
Yeah, which was exactly like the rote.
Yeah.
And so because it's the same land, it's the same place. Yeah.
That's so true. You know, there's just difference of well, availability of produce, and of course the language difference is obviously there, but dietary preferences are mostly similar over there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is where outside the Partition Museum, I had chanced to be there on a day when it was literally no one but us. So
wow, yeah.
So talking about Delectable Punjab, which was you know the series which I started. So under the Delectable Punjab series, I began hosting meals at home in 2018, where seasonal vegetarian dishes of Punjab were highlighted and served to the guests. This is back in Bombay. The positive feedbacks and the curiosity that they generated among the people led to turning this into a more regular project, and actually is now a research project which I'm working on continuously. I think the biggest push for me was the fact that I didn't know that for people our food was something which was, you know, they were curious about. I served dishes like, you know, the sukhi dal, which we do, the sukhi urad dal, which we do, the actual sag, which we make at our places, you know, the rajma and the curry and all of, and it was all completely vegetarian fare. And I literally invited all my friends from the food industry. It was not even a pop-up. It was just a meal because everyone complained that I always write about food, but I never cook for them. So I thought that this is a great opportunity to just call all of them home. And it was just a gathering of friends. And it led to this becoming such a big project because all of them went home and wrote about it. And that led to this becoming a seasonal pop-up. So from winter to, you know, the spring with the Baisakhi, then summers, monsoon, and well, you know, the cycle goes on. So I started doing these pop-ups which garnered beautiful results. This is what was served in the first pop-up.
Wow.
I served puri there because, well, it was Bombay and it was really humid and I didn't want to spend that long in the kitchen, longer than I had already spent. But yes, this was the food that was served over there. And this is from the Delectable Punjab series on Instagram, which I first started. We started with the masala gur, you know, for sweet beginnings. And masala gur is something you can see being made in Punjab throughout the winters. If you are on the national highway, you will see that every few kilometers, you will actually see this being made and you can pick it up fresh. What you have on the right side is called chit or saluna, which is made with ginger and garlic and a little milk. It's like a soup which you have in the winters to give yourself some warmth. People usually have it with roti, or you can simply just have it as it is. So what you see is just literally just garlic, milk, turmeric. That's it.
Oh, wow.
Well, there's Rajma Chawal, of course. I had to put it in. As I say, it's shagun for me. I can't do a presentation without it. Then there's the sukhi dal. Now, what I did with the sukhi dal was because I had to adapt to the Bombay temperature. So instead of doing the urad dal, I did it with the moong dal and made it into a more salad-like thing. So it was served as an appetizer for people. And well, this is the group of people, my set of friends from the food industry who were present for the first pop-up. You can also spot the first the master chef here. He happened to be in India at that time, and well, I was surprised that he actually turned up for it, which is Sashi Chenya. And then there's Ringa Korosh, Kalyan, of course. So, well, these are the people who I have to credit for making Delectable Punjab what it is today.
It's wonderful.
This is the length at which all of them wrote. We have Nikhil, Korosh, Shanti, Sai, Kalyan, and all of these people, and in so much detail. that it led to this becoming, well, what it is today, like I said. So, well, all these years that I spent in the darkness of where I came from and who I am have now culminated into this journey which I have embarked on. This is now bigger than me and my questions about my identity. This is now about us, about all of us who want to understand ourselves better and preserve our heritage. Well, it's a long road ahead. And like I said, I have only just begun. And I'm so glad that you gave me this opportunity. Thank you.
Oh, this is wonderful, Vernika. And I mean, I think I speak on behalf of everyone here when I say we wish you the absolute best with this journey. I, for one, am thoroughly enjoying it since
Thank you so much.
Been connected on Instagram. And I think it was sort of an instant connection.
Absolutely.
Which is always so lovely. I think the best thing that's come out of this lockdown is the number of friends that we've all made on Instagram, this community.
As a community, as a blogging community, we all have grown more in this lockdown than ever before, connected and made more real connections. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's been a mouth-watering session. I think everyone is very hungry and just wants a plate of rajma chawal. And while I was looking at your picture of the achar, I was thinking of Sangeeta's session yesterday. That's what you watched and think, oh, now I know how to make this.
Had it been any better time, I would have said that please come over, everyone. I'd love to make food, but it's still an open offer. Whenever things get fine, come home for a delectable Punjab meal. I'll be more than happy to do this.
Oh, we can't wait. We'll definitely put it out to everyone who's on here. I think everyone would be very interested whenever we can do things again. Thank you so much.
Anytime.
And thank you everyone for being with us this evening. Tomorrow, a very, very, very special guest, my Dadi, will be with us. She's a survivor of 1947. She is a fighting spirit to date, and she has the power to regale anybody with her stories for as long as they will sit there. So I promise you it will be very entertaining, and we do hope to see you. And I'm glad Facebook worked today. Hopefully it works tomorrow. Good night, folks.
Really looking forward to that. Thank you so much, Ragini. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.